$20 bill.
Yes. Were you hoping for a larger answer than that? I mean, I can say, one of the things, and I wrote an op-ed about this, one of the things that fascinates me, and it, depending on my frame of my mood, sends me into fits of despair, is social media. I love social media. It helps me get the word out. It helps me engage. Last night, I actually engaged in a Twitter conversation with Richard Schiff from West Wing. 20 years ago, you would not have been able to reach out and have a conversation with someone who was on a show that you loved, talking about that show. So Twitter is great. Social media is great. But it's also a valve into the darkest, most ignorant recesses of American life. And in a lot of ways, this controversy over Andrew Jackson and the $20 bill is a perfect illustration of that. From my perspective, as someone who's written a book about Andrew Jackson's prejudices about banking, his attitudes toward paper currency, the fact that Jackson is on the $20 bill is the go-to example of irony. When people ask me to define irony, I say, take out your wallet, Andrew Jackson on the $20 bill, that's irony. But the way that discussion got framed is, I think, the problem. Because the way that discussion got framed was it was a framing of American hero versus American slave owner. And I think both of those issues are important, but I don't think that's the biggest recommendation for why Andrew Jackson should or should not be on the $20 bill. And in fact, if you go back and look at what rescued Hamilton, the Treasury Department came out and said, we're keeping Hamilton in large part because most of you complained, but also because Hamilton was the father of the economic system of the United States. And that's what saved him. It wasn't a frame of Hamilton hero or Hamilton, guy who cheated on his wife. It was very much related to policy, whereas when it came to Jackson, you couldn't have that debate in terms of policy. You had to have that debate in terms of Andrew Jackson, genocidal maniac, Andrew Jackson, American hero. So yeah, Jackson should absolutely be off the $20 bill. There's no reason why an anti-banking, anti-paper currency gold bug should be on a central bank note. Yes? Yeah, I appreciate that question. Actually, I think it's a number of questions. And, one has to do with the balkanization of disciplines, the divorce of history from sociology, from political science, from international relations, from economics. And so those disciplines are not talking to one another in a lot of ways. The hyper-specialization, where now you're talking in very, very sophisticated, discipline-specific lingo that sort of creates barriers for keeping people out. All of those things, and then you have an academy that's talking to itself, but not engaging with the wider public. And I think all of those things are part of the problem, because I agree with you. I agree with you that there is a profound level of ignorance in the general public, and I count myself as part of the general public. The amount of things that I would need to know to make informed decisions about public policies and to weigh candidates' positions on things is mind-blowing. I mean, you need to know something about international relations. You need to know something about economics. You need to know something about statistical analysis. You need to know something about criminology. You certainly need to know something about law. You need to know something about history. And not for nothing, I'm not a dumb guy. I'm not an uneducated person. But when you think about the level of time that I, as an academic, have to spend educating myself about those things, and I still feel my shortcomings. The average person on the street who's working a 9-to-5 job, has a couple of kids, has a mortgage, all that kind of stuff, yeah, I can understand why it's overwhelming, and so that we end up falling back on really, really simplistic bumper sticker slogans. And, and it's with anything. It's with economics, it's with history, it's with all of these kinds of things. And I agree with you. I mean, the discussion in 2016 among the various candidates is not nuanced. Because we have a primary system that doesn't privilege that. We have a general election system that doesn't privilege that. But that being said, it's same as it ever was. I mean, when Andrew Jackson was not getting up and giving these long treatises on economic theory and how that was going to work out in his policies. John Quincy Adams tries, and it brought his political career to a very abrupt end. So I don't think that it's something new. I don't think that there was a time when, the general public was better educated. Never in the history of humanity has it been easier or cheaper to access high-quality, reliable information. But by the same token, you still need the skills to sift the diamonds from the dirt. And I think that's what we're not educating people about. How to educate themselves, how to give them the skills to say, okay, this person has absolutely no reason, I shouldn't be listening to this person. When Glenn Beck tells me to buy gold, I should run screaming for the hills. But there's an attractiveness to that simplicity. And I think, if you study the political history of the country, we are always falling for people that seem to have really simple, bite-sized answers to what turn out to be really incredibly complicated questions. And there are always unintended consequences of policies. I mean, the unintended consequence of Jackson's policies was to trigger the Panic of 1837. He didn't mean for that to happen. I'm not even sure necessarily he could have predicted that. But nevertheless, with hindsight, we can see that that's what happened. Would a more astute economist have been able to point that out? Would a more astute economist have been able to say, whoa, you don't want to do this, you want to do these other... I don't know. It's one of the great counterfactuals of American history. But I appreciate the question. I think you're absolutely right. Well, I mean, and here's the thing about being a historian. Historians tend to be small c conservative in the sense that we don't see a lot of change over time. Social media is great, and it's changing the world. But to me, it's what the telegraph was in the 1820s and 1830s. It's what the railroad was. It's what the cheap wood pulp press was. An ability to spread information over long distances. And the upside of that is people can become better educated. The downside of that is there's a whole lot more garbage that's being churned out. Partisan political stuff, all those kinds of things. And the people are making decisions based on that garbage. So I see, in periods of great democratization, where the costs of access to new technologies come down, the flip side of that is an increase in partisanship, because it's easier and cheaper to disseminate a particular point of view. When I was a kid, if you were going to have some radical right or left-wing, newsletter, you needed a small printing press in your basement or a photocopier. The cost of that was prohibitive. Now, you can just put up a website for $20 a year and, buy an email distribution list and spam people and, create a Facebook page for nothing. So on the one hand, now it's easier, but I also see a lot of symmetry between that ease and the drop in cost and earlier periods in American history. And studying those periods, that absolutely has an impact on politicians. It makes them more responsive to the voice of the people. But it also can make them more responsible to the most extreme voices, the ones that are screaming the loudest, the ones with the flashiest web pages, the ones with the largest direct mail lists. And so there's a trade-off. Increased democracy does tend to lead to increased partisanship. Yes?